Hello, I'm Leslie Wilcox. I'm going to talk about the smart actions of leading companies when it comes to robotic process automation, sourcing and tool selection. So on the first slide that I'm going to show you, you can see the major sourcing choices. Do it yourself, use advisors, use RPA vendors or partners, or use your BPO outsourcing service providers. I always recommend at this stage that there is a large element of doing it yourself initially, because there's an awful lot of learning you need to do in order to get up to speed and to manage specific tools, but also service providers, whether they're RPA service providers or BPO service providers or systems integrators. So retained capability becomes a big issue. You might have to pay for that in terms of building up your capability, but there is another reason for doing this, which is that there are already skill shortages in this area. And if you outsource this to other service providers, you'll discover that you're either going to have to pay a lot for premium labor, or you're not going to get premium labor working on your particular case. And that applies to management consultancies as well. So having said that, you will need help. You will need to use advisors. The good news is that there are some very good ones out there. They've vacuumed up the experienced people in this area, but they can be working on your case. And many of them actually like to facilitate your learning in order to make you self-operating quite quickly. So that's all good. The other thing is using RPA vendors and the partners that surround that. That's interesting. RPA vendors themselves, some of them do provide quite a lot of training and support, and some of them are praised for that by their clients. We recognize that. But you can get too dependent, remembering that most of these are in exponential growth processes at the moment, 2018, and will be into 2019. And so these service providers are heavily into marketing, heavily into sales, heavily into contracting. And I'm not saying that they want to neglect support, but it's probable that that will be less of a priority than the marketing side. So the other thing you can do is to give them to your BPO service providers. Mixed results there. Sometimes BPO service providers have developed their own tools and they haven't actually been that good. Sometimes they've adopted existing tools from the leading RPA tool providers. That's interesting in the sense that they've got to make a profit out of that. So it's interesting to find out whether you're going to end up paying more for the BPO service providers adopting the tools rather than yourself. These are just some interesting observations about sourcing. The other thing that we want to talk about is tool platform, tool selection. You will all have to do this, and you will all invent your own criteria for the type of tool that you really want to go for. And not everyone wants the same kind of tool, we've discovered. And there are over 45 vendors now supposedly selling RPA. We think there's an awful lot of what we call RPA washing amongst them. They're not all selling the same thing. Some of them aren't really selling what we would really call robotic process automation. So it's very important that you do a proper analysis of these different products. And if you set the criteria right, and advisors can help you with that, or experienced people you've brought in, what will emerge from your analysis is that there are really three major kind of tools. And I show this on the next slide. I call Journey 1, if you choose that one, I call that desktop recorded automation or desktop robotic automation. Journey 2 I call enterprise robotic process automation. And Journey 3 I call self-development kits. Now I'm not going to mention particular suppliers here, but if you're close to the market, you'll be able to fit in your potential suppliers into these camps. So desktop recorded automation, a supplier who basically originated in the desktop realm, built robotic software to record a process, run it more efficiently in an automated way, save time, save costs, very easy to learn for business ops people and users anywhere, and so very attractive to them to get out of the IT queue. One of the problems there that we're beginning to understand as we see more and more deployments is that these tend to run into problems if you try to scale or turn it into an enterprise safe or enterprise scaled piece of RPA equipment. And then you start having to pay money, which you probably didn't pay at the start because it looked quite cheap, money for scaling, writing new code, trying to fit this with the existing systems, fitting it with the big enterprise systems, and the total cost of ownership has a lot of hidden costs. When we look at the one on the far right, the self-development kits, that's an interesting one because what you really get is a user application interface with some standardized software, which then has to be populated by IT developers who have to code. So you'll find that you quickly run into high costs on using IT developers either in-house or from the provider of the RPA tool. And again, you get hidden costs when you start to scale and do something other than run it off the desktop. The more interesting tools for banking companies, financial services companies, insurance companies who are very risk averse is the middle one, the enterprise robotic process automation tools, which are dumb pieces of software that are surrounded by more smart software that does the work of enabling you to scale technically and does the work of having IT governance built in, a lot more built in. So very often you need to prepare much more at the front end to deploy those, but the costs at the back end of the deployment are not so high as the other types of tools. So it's up to you where you want to fit. Some people who run it from the IT function or have a lot of IT or engineering skills kind of like Journey 1 and Journey 3 because it enables them to get more involved in the technical side of the RPA, and they feel less beholden to the RPA supplier. And when you look at the major RPA suppliers here, certainly they spread themselves out from, one of them is actually mainly a desktop automation kind of tool. One of them fits between desktop and the RPA tool, and one of them fits right in the middle of enterprise RPA. And then there are variations on that amongst many of the other following suppliers. So this gives you some insight into sourcing and tool selection based on the evidence that we've accumulated across our 3 books. We're going to have a look next at change management and stakeholder buy-in.